is my data stored where other organizations might accidentally access it, like what happened with Samsung in the early ChatGPT days?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And especially one when you're coming in from a business side, right, that you have to take into account, right? It's one thing to use this on a personal basis, right, to ask questions. And it's another thing when you start getting business data involved. So one of the big things to always keep in mind when you're looking at this is that there's the public side of this, right? And then there's the more business focused side. And so Copilot is using the same background technology in the sense that, it's using large language models to help train it and things like that.
Hmm.
But the where that how those models are trained and what data it has access to is going to differ whether you're using the public facing OpenAI, for example, right? Or if you're using the something like the Azure AI or OpenAI service, right? So really when you get down to it, right, your Copilot instance is going to really be for your particular tenant, right, is really in the guardrails of that tenant, right? So you have the large language model backing behind everything, but when you start getting your specific data for your organization, right, it's only going to live within your Azure tenant or M365 environment, right? And so that's something that, it's not making requests out to, OpenAI like your Chat GPT is, right, or any other AI tool.
Hmm.
It's going to be sandboxed, right? If you want to think of it that way, right, within your tenant. So, that's step one. And then the other thing to kind of keep in mind or things to keep in mind here, right, is that, there's because Copilot is built on top of Azure, you get a lot of those goodies, right, that Azure has built in. So, for example, Copilot is going to encrypt data in transit and in rest, right? So,
Yeah.
anything that you send to Copilot or anything that it's gathering and sending back to you, right, is always going to be encrypted and transmitted in a secure fashion. And then, like we were talking about, there's that logical isolation of customers, right? Because, customer A has their tenant and, everything is housed in there, right? If you go to customer B, it's still running on the Azure service, right, behind the scenes, but that's completely separated from a logistic, isolation perspective. And so that same methodology, right, comes forward when you're talking about, Microsoft Copilot and the business case of that.
Yeah. I'm assuming most people will know, but just in case we have someone watching this,
Mhm.
what's a tenant?
Yeah. So your a tenant is basically the collection, if you look at it from like an Azure perspective, it's a collection of resources that your organization has, and it's a way to kind of group all of those together, right? So your Azure tenant, for example, might be if you're using like the Microsoft demo data, Contoso, right? So it'd be
Mhm.
if you have something at contoso.com, right? When you log into like Azure, you're going to log in as, Bob Smith at contoso.com, and that at contoso.com is going to tell Microsoft which tenant, right, you have access to. So all of your Azure resources then would be under your quote unquote Contoso tenant, if you want to look at it that way. So it's just the grouping of objects that your organization has access to, whether that's in Outlook or SharePoint or Azure, right? All of those are going to fall under that quote unquote tenant. And
Yeah.
then you can set your security right within that tenant to what users have access to what.